Well, greetings and salutations, fellow members of the Movie Club. Welcome to our newest gathering of Movie Club. I am, of course, your host, John Campea, and it's great to have you guys joining us here after we took a 1-week hiatus because we were in Las Vegas last weekend, of course, or last week for CinemaCon. But now we are back to continue on our three-part journey. We're on the second leg of our three-part journey through the Lord of the Rings original three films. Of course, a couple weeks ago, we did Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. And today, we pick things up with Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, one of the greatest sequels in cinematic history, as a part of one of the greatest trilogies in cinematic history. I'm joined, of course, by Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how are you doing today?
John, it's good to talk about these movies again. I love this movie, and it's great to talk about it.
And right beside him, no longer on the island, it's Ray Ora. Ray, how you doing?
How you doing? I think Rob is celebrating The Two Towers.
Right.
Ooh, and we got Chris Carr's lower third on him. But we'll get that fixed up at some point through the show.
Just message Chris Carr if you need something from me.
So, okay, we are here to talk about Two Towers. Now, I'm going to let you guys know, normally this will not be the set for Movie Club. Normally, Movie Club will be held over on Stage B, but Stage B isn't ready yet, and Stage B probably won't be ready for another week or two. So we're going to do Movie Club from right here today. So let's talk about Two Towers. Now, and by the way, guys, this is how it's going to go. We're going to talk about the movie for about a half hour or so, and then we're going to throw it open to you guys, and we're going to hear your thoughts, observations, commentary about Lord of the Rings Two Towers. Just simply use Super Chat if you're watching live and send that in, and we'll read those off in just a bit. We're going to spend the first half hour talking about our thoughts on it. So, guys, when the first Lord of the Rings film came out, and we got Fellowship of the Ring, a lot of people wondering, is this even a movie you can make? Can you do it? The real only iteration we've had of it before that was that, how do you pronounce it? Baskin or
Ralph Bakshi.
Bakshi, the quasi-animated thing, which of course lives in infamy.
And then they finished it off on TV.
That's right. Yes, they did. And
that
that was really the only kind of iteration of Lord of the Rings we'd had on screen and in a medium. Of course, there was the most famous of all songs by Leonard Nimoy. Bilbo
the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins.
Ballad of Bilbo Baggins.
Boy, yeah.
That's something to sing about. We should do an entire Movie Club just on that music video. One of the greatest music videos of all time. But we went in to see it, and it's like people didn't know, could this actually be good? The marketing looked great. People were very excited going into it. It had a terrific cast, but still people didn't really know if it was going to be just completely silly or whatever. And then we saw it. People loved it. It was a huge hit. Now we're going into Two Towers, and there were expectations, and the possibility and the potential for a huge letdown was there. Because Peter Jackson, I think it was pretty much universally agreed, other than some people, it's like, where's Tom Bombadil? But other than that, people were pretty much universally agreed that this thing was incredible going into the second one. And I still remember saying to a friend of mine, well, it's not going to be anywhere near as good as the first one. And that's okay. But you can't possibly have lightning strike twice. Lightning struck twice. They pick up right from the moment that the first film ends off. And so, Rob, let's just talk about some general feelings here, general overall perceptions of the movie. When you think about Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, what's your reaction to it? What do you think about it?
I was wondering, how were they going to open this movie?
Yeah.
And we see a flashback to the Balrog and Gandalf fighting. And I remember thinking, I wouldn't have thought of that.
With the White Mountains, and you hear the lines from the first movie.
Yeah, and what I loved, they're battling. He's got his sword, was it Glamdring or whatever, and they're fighting, and it has one of my favorite effect shots in any movie ever. They're falling into this just deep chasm, and then there's this giant, wide shot with water, and you see him come out into this cavern, and it's from way far
and you see
away.
the light of the Balrog as they're falling down.
And it was and you realize that whenever they have an opportunity to show scope, they gave you these just monstrously huge vistas, and it was something that I hadn't really seen before, in a movie. They wouldn't, people were scared to get that far back. They would have kept, and I remember thinking, you just see them fall, and I was blown away by that.
Also, in that shot, I want to point this out. One of the coolest shots in all of the films is as they're falling, like Gandalf is still all business, and he starts racing down. He goes into a nosedive towards the Balrog, and there's the sword that's falling too. And there's this awesome shot where he like, stretches out his hand, grabs the sword, and like, yeah, have that thing. He goes right at it. And then like one of the best lines ever, like one of the best lines ever. He goes, and what did he do? I smote his ruin upon the mountainside. I want one moment in my life when I can legitimately pull that line out. I smote his ruin upon the mountainside. Just once, I want to have a reason to say that. That'd be awesome.
It was so awesome. And then, you get back to, obviously the Fellowship is broken, and Merry and Pippin they've been taken by the orcs. And so Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn have to mount some kind of a rescue. And then, of course, Sam and Frodo are now going to head off to Mordor by themselves under the watchful eye of Smeagol, a.k.a. Gollum. And what I love is immediately it sets up this triptych of stories that you're incredibly invested in. And like I was telling you the other day, the way we saw the incredible aerial photography in Top Gun Maverick.
Oh, so good.
This movie has the greatest aerial photography of dudes running and orcs running across landscapes. I mean, these giant sweeping vistas I get tired just watching them. I'm like, in my age, if I was running that much, I'd have a heart attack and die.
Well, it's a great line by Gimli in it. He goes, what is there? We're not built for long distances. Dwarfs, very dangerous over short distances. That's it. We're not meant for, we're very dangerous over short distances. Ray, when you approach this, you haven't watched this film in a long time. You sat down to watch it again the last couple of days. What are your impressions?
Well, I remember feeling when I saw it in the theaters, I remember feeling always helpless and scared when it was covering like Frodo and Sam, or I'm not sure about the other two. Like I guess I didn't really care about the other two. No, because it's like Frodo had the ring, so the other two, as long as Frodo didn't die, then I guess whatever. But the three Legolas, Aragorn, and
Gimli.
I like how they started like bonding with each other, getting to know. That was my favorite part. Like they started going back and forth with each other, and like that's what I enjoyed the most about the movie was those three. I mean, there's a couple of parts where I was like, "Is the wind only on Legolas?" Like, and it's like, no. There's one good one towards the end where they're in the castle, right? And like his hair is flowing. And then they go to another shot with Aragorn, and it's just no air, whatever. So I was just like,
Aragorn's hair always has to be half damp and hanging straight down. Legolas' hair has to have 5 gallons of conditioner in it.
I call that the Bret Hart versus the other wrestler. The Bret Hart look versus the other wrestler that has the dry hair. But anyways, yeah, anytime the orcs came in, even if like sometimes they look really weak, like because Aragorn would just kill them, I still get scared. Those things like frighten me, like till this day.
You were talking about the relationship stuff. There's a couple of great moments, 2 of them that stand out to me when you're talking about the relationship. Like this movie really develops that relationship, and then there's a lot of payoff of those relationships in the third film. But in this one, 2 really great moments, both involving, actually 3 great moments involving the combination of all 3. With Aragorn and Legolas, it's after Legolas kind of freaks out. It's like, they're all going to die. But then he approaches Aragorn afterwards and says, I was wrong to despair. And, they do that bro, when, bros don't hug. They put one hand on each other's shoulder. Boom.
And
boom.
that's a weird thing to see Legolas like show that sort of emotion, right?
Yeah.
Mostly through the whole thing, you sense his confidence. Like, I think he's always come off as confident as Aragorn.
So that was the one. So that was the Aragorn Legolas. And then Legolas and Gimli, as they're standing at the wall, and you're panning along the wall, and you see all these elves, and all of a sudden there's this head. It's like he goes, what does he say? Should I do this or should I get you a box?
Yeah, he's like,
and Gimli smiles at him and laughs. So you see them now starting to bond, right? But I think my favorite out of the three, so we had the Legolas and Aragorn, we had Legolas and Gimli, but my favorite one was Aragorn and Gimli. When the orcs are trying to battering ram down the door, and Aragorn and Gimli go sneak around the outside, and he goes, come on, we can take them. And Aragorn goes, it's a long way. And Gimli's like, toss me. What? Toss me, you'll have to toss me. But don't tell the elf. Not a word. And like, so you see them bonding as well. So yeah, you're right. You really do see every combination of those three like developing their fellowship. And again, that all pays off.
I think that's so important for the next one.
Yeah,
so you can
vital for the next.
You can feel like you have that feeling like we can't lose any one of these guys, because they're like a unit, like in the third.
Well, and that's what I think was one of the joys of this film is watching this. They're like a strike team, the three of them,
exactly,
and they haven't gotten to know each other that much. I mean, they're basically defined by who they are as people, like an elf, a dwarf, and a human being, and by working together. There's humor there, but they all have mutual respect because they're really good at what they do. Even though Gimli is a dwarf, he's a badass, and they all recognize that. And they all are sort of equal in each other's eyes. They all have something to offer. And watching that group dynamic develop is one of the joys of this film. And I think it's true of even Merry and Pippin when they're off on their own. We get to meet and learn, like when they go into Fangorn Forest and they meet Treebeard, there's real wonder and awe. But then you see because they're out of their element the whole time. They're like fish out of water.
Yeah,
they've tagged along on this journey, but they haven't really had their moment to shine. And yet, when you explore how they're learning about Treebeard and they hear more about what's going on with Middle Earth, I mean, they're the ones that really discover the danger. Like Tolkien was always worried that industrialization would destroy the land, destroy the ecology, destroy the trees. And they're really the first to discover through Treebeard the danger of what Mordor represents and what Saruman represents. I mean, Saruman's he'll cut down every tree that exists to make more of his army to win the day. And
for the world of industry. And therein lies where Merry and Pippin start to actually become important figures in the story. Up until this point, they've tagged along, they have whatever, but by them engaging and getting the Ents involved in the war, which was a significant turning point, like because even Saruman, it caught him totally off guard. Like it's played so great. There's no dialogue from Christopher Lee here, but it's all done in his face. As the Ents start to attack Isengard, you see Christopher Lee Saruman running to the balcony and looking out. It's like, it totally caught him off guard. This is not something he expected. And it was totally brought on by Merry and Pippin to get them involved here. And of course, then they become even more significant as we get into the third film. But like, this is where you start to see them actually take an influential role in the movies.
That part, I was like, Saruman's a little over dramatic. There's not really that big of an earthquake going on. He's like all over the balcony, like, oh.
Then again, you got giant fucking trees coming and killing all your guys.
It wasn't, until when they got the what do you call the tree?
The Ents?
The Ents. Like, the twins I didn't really care for them. Like, I actually thought they were a liability, or like they would get the team killed because like they would do like some dumb things that would attract attention. So
throw yourself down. Was it? Rid us of your stupidity. Yeah, throw yourself down next time. Rid us of your stupidity. Yeah.
I got to point out one scene where like we all were like amazed and we're like, why not? That part where they're about to go to, they're about to fight the orcs and Legolas gets onto that horse in that stylish way. You know how he pulls himself up?
Oh, yeah.
I remember the theater going, well, especially most of the women in the theater were like, including Anne. It was just, that guy was just super just set there just to be like a poser.
There was a lot of Legolas in this. Like even like when the Battle of Helm Deep Star 2 and he does the whole thing where he snowboards on a shield down the stairs, like boom, 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 taking all these fools out.
He was awesome in this movie. Like I only have a couple figures, and I know from Fellowship I bought Frodo and Gandalf, but the Two Towers I only had one figure, and that was Legolas. That's the one I bought because that's the guy that actually stood out to me throughout the whole film. Like, I really liked all the arrow stuff that he was doing in this one.
Oh yeah.
Another thing that's introduced that I think is wonderful is Rohan. You know, the land of Rohan, and you meet the Rohirrim,
the horse lords,
and horse lords, and you know that set. They actually built the exterior, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. But it's tragic because when you first meet Theoden, Grima Wormtongue has totally ensorcelled him via the power of the Dark Lord, and he's this. I mean, one of my favorite moments in this is when Theoden is broken free of that power, and the way they use effects work and stuff, and you see the color come back into his face,
the light back into his eyes.
I love that so much, and because by the end, when you finally get to know him, and he's a very powerful king, you realize, my God, the darkness of Mordor has permeated every facet and every place in Middle Earth, and just how dangerous what's going on is, and it's freaking scary.
But there's a beautiful moment there too, as the life comes back into his face, and he looks at Eowyn, his niece, and he says, "I know your face." I love that line.
It's great.
But then a little bit later on, after he decides to spare a worm, and he says, "Where's Theoden? Where's my son?"
Oh.
It's like, because we knew at that point that his son had died. We never really got a chance, like the audience never got a chance to meet his son. By the time we met him, he was already like dying.
Yeah.
Right.
And then eventually died. So that was our introduction to Theoden. But even throughout that, like, you get a sense of him very quickly. And like, to me, Theoden is the superstar of Lord of the Rings. Like, to me, he's the superstar, especially once you get into the Return of the King. But it's in this movie that you start to see and understand his heart, where his head's at. Like, he's always about protect my people. I'm not going to go to war because I'm going to protect my people. We're going to get everybody to Helm's Deep because I'm going to protect my people. Like, everything is about that. And then you see a little bit of shifting in that where he goes very much just from Rohan-centric to, of course, the greatest line in cinematic history. You know, the fires have been lit, Gondor calls for aid, and Rohan shall answer. I mean, so that great turning moment happens because of all the groundwork that's laid in this film with him.
You know, and another thing they do is they explore Elrond's relationship with Liv Tyler.
Yeah, Arwen.
You know, with Arwen, and he's like, "Look, I get you love Aragorn, but you can't stay with him. I mean, you'll live thousands of years, and he's going to die."
Yeah,
and you see you learn more of the dynamic of the other race of elves, and so you don't just have our three main storylines, but you've got these others, Rohan and
Gondor,
and Gondor, but the elves as well. So you're getting all of this really interesting world building and backstory that all works in concert. It's like you're watching this great orchestra playing a great piece of classical music, because Peter Jackson has and Philippa and Fran wrote the script with him. He's so got all of these. He's weaving this tapestry together, and the story is so compelling. Like none of it. The pacing is great, and you're never not enthralled by what's going on. I mean, it's a long movie, but you never feel its length. I mean, you're completely absorbed in the storytelling, and that's a hard thing to do and keep you involved with everybody. You never think to yourself, "Oh, I don't like this storyline. I'm bored. Let's get away from these people."
Yeah, there's not a bad storyline in the whole thing.
I like the way Rob brings up what he just brought up, because it gives you an insight of what the actual other races, I guess you could say, think or about the other races, I guess. So like, it's when the three run into like different groups, they're like, sometimes they look at him like, why are you with this elf? Or why, I really like that they were different, and people accepted that they were together. You know what I mean? When they would run into, what was that one army they ran into, that first one? The human.
The Riders of Rohan.
Yeah. So like, it was just
with
like
Eomer.
Yeah.
Billy Butcher.
Billy the Butcher.
a young Billy the Butcher.
By the way, I just want one of, to me, an inadvertently hilarious moment in this film, and I didn't really think about it before. So Galadriel and Elrond have this elf Zoom call,
right?
Telepathically, right? And she basically says to him, are we going to leave them to face this alone or whatever, right? So one of the, like, before there was Endgame and the portal scene, there was the horn sounding and everybody runs to the gate and the elven battalion shows up to help at Helm's Deep. I still remember, it's one of the first times I was in a movie theater where the audience erupted into cheers when that elven battalion showed up, right? But I'm watching it this time, and I never thought of this before. I'm watching it this time, and there's that lieutenant dude who, where Aragorn runs up to him and says, "You are most welcome," right? I kind of was half expecting him to go, it's like, Lord Elrond says it's great. Where's Lord Elrond? Oh, he was busy. He sent us. He told us to come and help you guys. But that he was very busy. He couldn't come himself.
What's funny is there's no one at the castle going, "Hey, we're at capacity," because it looked like they let a lot of people in.
Well, Helm's Deep's very big.
Oh, okay.
They can hold a lot of people.
I was just laughing at it. I was like, this line is forever.
That's a lot of elves.
And they were standing out there for what it seems like hours. I mean.
But here's one thing I always thought about, and I still don't know the answer to this, and maybe one of you guys can help me out. That 10,000 Uruk-hai army is marching on Helm's Deep. And then they're within eye shot. Like, they see them off, and there they are. Blah, blah. And it's after that the horn blows, and the elven army shows up. And I'm like, how did the elven army get there?
Well, the elven army, they're like sneaky.
Very sneaky.
They came in the back way.
Sure, the back way. And then came around to the front, knocked on the front door.
The sneaky route.
There's rules to war, right? The orcs were following those rules.
Oh yeah, like if another army shows up,
yeah. Okay, go ahead. We'll let you set up. We'll let you set up.
Elves first.
But there is a little bit of truth in that, and that there were very, the European, like the Napoleonic Wars, they did have those rules of engagement.
Yeah, but not orcs.
The Uruk-hai did not.
But when they do show up in that armor, it's badass.
Well, I wish there was a timer of like when they were standing waiting for the orc army. Can you tell me the name? I'm sorry. I feel like
Uruk-hai?
Uruk-hai. When they're waiting for the Uruk-hai, I wish there was a little timer about how long they were standing out there. Because it starts raining. I was like, oh, that's a couple hours in that armor. They're waiting for them. Just start shooting them from the castle or whatever.
I still remember too when the Battle of Helm's Deep, which by the way, we're glossing over.
Yeah.
The Battle of Helm's Deep. Now, I get it. This is going on 2 decades ago now. But lest we forget, we had never seen anything like that on the big screen before.
No.
Like, when the Battle of Helm's Deep happened and that movie came out, like, I remember as an audience member myself being so blown away and so overwhelmed. And me and my friends talked about it all year. Until obviously Return of the King came out. But that was something like today, we've had a lot of movies since that have had really big epic battle scopes, but at that time, like never. And I would contend maybe on one hand you can count the number of scenes that have come close to equaling the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Oh.
I mean, that was just incredible. And every bit of action had narrative behind it. Right?
Well, it's funny that you say that because on the disc,
What's a disc, Rob?
Well, I know, right? on the DVD and Blu-ray, I cut the behind the scenes editorial feature, and I learned something on it. The editorial staff thought that they had cut this. They called it a tasty battle. This is a tasty battle, but it was boring. This big battle they cut. Everyone thought it was great. But it was boring. After a while, you had what they call battle fatigue.
Right, yes.
And they realized that the only way to make this work is you always had to follow your characters. You had to know what your main characters were doing. Mm-hmm. So they never moved away from our main characters, Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn. You always went back to them. You didn't just show a bunch of dudes fighting in spectacle and that. You had to have, like you just said, narrative purpose. And you had to know where our characters were at. And even in that gigantic, massive, awesome battle that even today still holds up.
Still holds up.
You watch it, you're never far away from the narrative thrust. And you feel it gets dire. Like they're going deeper and deeper into the Hornburg or whatever. And you feel like this is the end of the world.
There are a lot of times it felt hopeless.
Really hopeless.
Like, actually, several times when even Theoden was like, well, we're screwed. Okay, they hold up. Then they get to another room. Well, now we're screwed. All right. Now, hold on a second. But before we go any further, ever try to order something online? You think, man, that's expensive. We're screwed. If only you had an app on your phone that looked for discount codes for you and automatically applied them. You need the folks at Honey. So we want to take a second and thank the sponsor of this episode of Movie Club, the folks at Honey. Today's episode of Movie Club is sponsored by Honey, the easy way to save when shopping on your iPhone or computer. Guys, more and more we enjoy shopping online, whether it's on our phones or our computers. And how many times have you gotten to the checkout and seen that promo code box and thought, man, if I only had a promo code, I could save some money? Well, thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past. Honey is the free shopping tool that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it finds to your cart. So here's the situation. You're shopping online on one of your favorite sites, and when you go to checkout, the Honey button appears, and all you have to do is click Apply Coupons. Then just wait a few seconds as Honey works its magic and searches for coupons it can find for that site that you're on, and if Honey finds a working coupon, just watch the price drop. Recently, Ann and I were hanging out at home one evening and we decided to order in, and the Honey button appeared. I was able to apply a coupon and I actually saved like $6 or $7. It was that easy to use. And Honey doesn't just work on your desktop computer, it also works on your iPhone. Just activate it on Safari on your phone and save on the go. So if you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this show. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/movie club. That's joinhoney.com/movie club. And thank you to the folks at Honey for supporting this episode of Movie Club. Again, guys, it actually does work. It has saved me money. It will save you money as well. All right, guys. I want us to back up a little bit before Helm's Deep actually happened, because Ray brought up something during the break that even just the journey to Helm's Deep becomes an adventure, because that's where we're introduced to something we had never seen. Like, I mean, again, CGI in Lord of the Rings took such massive leaps forward, but the wargs, when those goblin orc things start showing up on their wolf dogs, whatever, that was so, I just remember going, oh my God, when they first come over the hills and there's like 10 of them running
fast.
So fast.
Like, really? This is unfair now. This is seriously, the horse can't take that. I mean, come on.
And then that action sequence breaks out, leads to a great scene with Gimli killing one that's on top of him. Then an orc comes over, but he snaps the orc's neck. And then another warg on top of that. I mean, there was just great comedy worked in there too. And of course, Kevin Feige can get up and say, I am the king of fake deaths in movie. And then Peter Jackson will go, hold my beer. Because in this movie, we had two significant fake deaths. Number one, the return of Gandalf. Now he's Gandalf the White. But also, we have Aragorn going over the ledge. It's like, oh no, he's died. But then again, we, the audience, knew he wasn't dead.
Sure.
But still, then he makes his return, and Eowyn's all happy that he returned. And anyway, just that journey to Helm's Deep was awesome.
It was awesome. But, like you bring up the return of Gandalf. I mean, that shot, when he appeared, he's like, you can't see, he's backlit.
And they mixed in the voice of Christopher Lee.
You don't know what's going on. And then when he finally is revealed, the light comes down, he's got the staff, and he's all he's now transformed, more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Return to you now, at the turn of the tide.
I found the tide with bleach.
It's so clean.
Clean.
But it's so great. All of these scenes are designed like every scene it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's all satisfying. I mean, as you're like dragged along, you're being pulled through this amazing, it's so beautifully done. I mean, because they had the time, they really worked, well, they didn't have the time, but they really worked it. I mean, this movie's so entertaining, like on every level. You don't see this kind of grand sweeping entertainment. I mean, maybe some of, like you said, maybe Infinity War and Endgame get up there, but man, I mean, all the orchestration. And we should say something, too, about the Frodo and Sam. I mean, Sam's really the heart of this movie. And it's Sam, when you really start to see the weight of the ring on Frodo. They're going through like the dead marshes, the most horrible, they're going through the most horrible area. And it's Sam's like, no, Mr. Frodo, we have to go, And it's just like, I'd give up.
Well, but this is also the one, like, when we get into Return of the King, a lot of people start to recognize that, hey, Sam's kind of the hero of this story. But it's here in Two Towers where you really start to recognize it, because the loyalty and the faithfulness of Sam is really put to the test, not just because he stands by Frodo in dangers. He stands by Frodo when Frodo becomes a total douche dick.
Yep.
Like a total dick. And he understands it's the ring, but he puts up with a lot of shit from Frodo.
Who should know better? I mean, like, he sees through Gollum right away.
Yep.
You know, and Frodo's like, no, maybe, we gotta help him out. No.
This is a bad idea.
It also gives you an idea of how well he knows Frodo, like what they've been through.
Yeah.
I mean, if like somebody you just barely met, like changed like that, you'll be like, get away from me. Like you'll leave him. But the part where Frodo falls in the water and those things are reaching for him.
In the swamps of the dead.
Yeah, that creeped me out.
Marshes.
But I'm going to say one thing about this movie. Like, I didn't read any of the books. The one thing that I always liked about it is it reminded me of all the video games that I was playing where you picture your class and you would hack and slash with a bunch of other players, like at the arcade, or like there's like this game called Gauntlet Legends. I don't know. And so like I love the part where they're fighting and you can see all of their specialties and how they use the weapons,
the bow, the sword,
and that's something throughout all the movies that I always enjoyed, and it's like why it's some of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a coincidence. And whenever I watch one of these films, I want to play D&D. Like I totally want to go and start playing Dungeons and Dragons.
And this movie is these wars are what I thought the Northmen was gonna be like.
I think a lot of people thought that's what the Northmen
that's
was
what's
gonna be
disappointing because the poster shows all those ships,
but it's really
and
good.
One guy with an axe, and I'm like,
well, we're not going to get into the Northmen.
Yeah.
But let's fast forward now even to the end part here, because we've got when Gandalf is parting ways with Aragorn, he says, on the dawn of the fifth day, look to the east. And Gandalf kind of called it. But so the dawn is breaking. They look, and there's Gandalf up there. And then you realize Éomer's with him. And then he mentions the Rohirrim. And then the camera pans back. And there's a lot more of them than there were when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli had run into them, because they had like 40 of them before. Now there's like 400.
Well, they were able to unite the Rohan was able to unite all the horse lords and all that.
He'd been busy.
But I do love, when now for Wrath and now for Ruin and a Red Dawn, the hopelessness, like when Theoden's putting on his armor, and you really get the sense like, this is it, man. This is going to be this last stand, and they go out.
There is the horse and rider.
Yeah, that whole speech is so great. And then they all come running out, and they're doing not a bad job, but it's hopeless.
Yeah. But when it starts off, it doesn't start off that way, because Theoden stands there. Is this all you have, Saruman? And then the bomb goes off and turns everything on its head and stuff like that. But I still remember, man, when that scene, when the Rohirrim come over that hill and they start flooding down the hill. And we get something like that again in Return of the King when Rohan arrives. But it's like, oh, and you feel that. And the Ents are overtaking Isengard at that point. And it's the temporary win.
Right.
It's a temporary win that leaves into... I mean, Gandalf really does end the movie perfectly. He says, the battle for Helm's Deep is over. The battle for Middle-earth has just begun.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize that as they look off to Mordor, and you realize, oh, yeah, that wasn't even Mordor. That was Isengard.
Right.
I mean, the real fight is still coming. And then we get our first glimpse, I've always mispronounced it,
Osgiliath, yeah.
Yeah, the little town that's right outside of Gondor. It's kind of last line of defense before Gondor.
And it's just a mess.
It's already in ruin.
They've been fighting. It's just been back and forth, and there's like nothing left of it.
And that brings... We haven't even mentioned Faramir yet.
No.
So we meet Boromir's brother. He becomes more relevant in the next film, and a very convenient backup love interest for Éowyn. Because, basically Faramir, let's call him what he is. He's sloppy seconds, right? Oh. He's the second pick. He's second choice. But he'll live with that. So they get him there, but he finds him... Same traits as his brother, Boromir, right? It's like, I'm going to take you to my father, blah, blah. But he had a little bit more strength than Boromir did, because he was able to himself just say, you know what? No, I'm letting you go. You go. And that becomes pivotal to the movie. The rest of the movie doesn't happen unless that decision's made.
Right.
And but by the way, Ray and I were watching this last bit, and when Faramir decides to let Sam and Frodo go, his lieutenant says to him, you know the law. If you let them go, your life is forfeit. I'm like, wait a minute. What law exactly are we talking about?
Yeah.
Which specific law are we discussing? If you ever come across hobbits that are carrying a ring of power, it's the death penalty if you catch them and let them go. Like, is there a very specific law to that?
But I mean, I think it's like this is a weapon that Gondor should be able to wield. Like you can't, you can't, and Faramir gives it up. Like he's like, because in their minds they don't realize how corruptible they are. They don't realize. So you can't be like, what, you're gonna let a.
It has to do with going into that pit where he was swimming in the pond and they catch. That's a sacred pond. You can't. So.
Oh, that's what you're talking about, the pond. So you guys can't hear fact checker Jonathan at all. He's talking about the going into the sacred pool or whatever it was where they caught Smeagol and they were going to kill him.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that could be a connection to that.
But do we? I forget because Denethor's in this version of the movie.
I don't think we meet him until the next film.
Yeah, because they're in the extended version. We do.
Oh, okay.
There's a scene where there's a flashback to Denethor and Boromir and all that. Because I can't even remember what the theatricals are. Because I never. But I really do. Again, this whole idea of Gondor and the White City and how they're waiting for a king. They only have a steward, and so. There is no power, and then there's another scene in the Fellowship extended version where Boromir has a conversation with Aragorn and says, "Look, there's good in the world of men.
Yes,
you need to come back. You need to come back. You have to fight for your people." And even though he's being corrupted by the power of the Dark Lord and the One Ring, Boromir's still like, dude, you got an obligation. You got to come back. And I kind of love how all of the human characters, there are still noble humans there. There's not Faramir is one of them. He's got a big heart, but he's also smart. And even then, they could have made it look like all the humans are idiots, but they didn't. There's still smart people that are like, okay, I will let you go. Something's going on here, and I don't know, maybe I don't get it all, but I will let you go.
And by the way, Denethor, played by
John Noble,
who then goes on to play Billy Butcher's father in The Boys. So there's a little bit of a Lord of the Rings connection there, of course. I always like to find my connections. All right, so let's final thoughts on the movie before we move over and start hearing from the other members of the movie club here about this. But this was a worthy follow-up to the first one. It told everybody the first one was no fluke. The first one was a meticulously planned, crafted, beautifully executed with love and passion movie. The second one did that, and it just left us drooling at the mouth for number 3 at that point. But this is like one of the most special movies. A lot of people consider it to be the best of the Lord of the Rings films. But anyway, Rob, your final thoughts on it.
Well, I this seems so cliche to say now, but I remember going into The Empire Strikes Back the first time I saw it, and I was worried. Because Star Wars had meant so much to me growing up, and it was the first bootleg video cassette I'd owned. I'd seen it 100 times before Empire had come out. And going into Empire, I'm like, what if it's not good?
Yeah.
What if it's not good? And I now there's this retconning where people are like, well, Empire Strikes Back wasn't that good when it was. I'm like, let me tell you.
It's like, shut up.
And let me tell you.
For decades, we've all acknowledged.
You want to go and talk about some critics were, fantasy films in general were looked down upon, so were science fiction movies, by the critics of the time. Let me tell you this. Every kid who saw Empire Strikes Back thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen. Nobody went, eh. And when I felt kind of the same way when I saw Two Towers. I was like, is it going to be as good? And when it was over, I equated it in my mind to Empire. I'm like this. It was darker. It was different. The characters were not together. You had Luke going off to Dagobah. You had Han and Leia. And it was kind of like that. And I was elated coming out of this movie because I'm like, how much better can it get? I couldn't believe how good it was.
It was great. Ray, final thoughts on the movie?
I just remember this being my favorite movie out of the 3. I'm going to have to watch Return of the King again just to make sure. But I remember at the time, this was my favorite out of the 3. I just like learning about the characters individually in this movie, about Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn and all of them. Like, I mean, I like when you get a background from everybody, and then you see, and then they just fight together. It's like they don't have anything against their kind or their race or whatever. And when things go down, they stick together. And the end, they're almost all together again, right? They're just missing Samwise and Frodo. They're still off by their own.
Samwise.
Samwise. Sorry.
When the way he narrates the end of the movie, it's like the stories, Mr. Frodo.
Yes,
you know.
There's some good monologuing in Lord of the Rings. I think that's one of the weaker ones in the series.
I didn't like the Gandalf one either, where they're sitting on the horses and he's like narrating like your line that you liked. I didn't like it. I just thought it was a little corny.
I like that a lot.
Well, that was done very late in the movie, that narration, because they didn't know how to end it. And they needed him to sort of give that summation. And I thought it tied the movie together in a nice bow, because it takes all these disparate elements sort of.
Well, and it also served because I think the first film, there was some criticism, even amongst everybody who loved it. There was some criticism about the first film to a lot of people who felt the ending was very sudden. It's like, all right, well, there's Mordor. Let's start walking.
Oh, hated that.
Right? So this one, like as soon as you start hearing the monologue from Sam, you know, as the audience, okay, they're wrapping it up. This is the ending. This is the speech that ends the film. And it felt a lot more of a natural ending as opposed to, you know, the first film, which was like all of a sudden the credits started to roll. So this one felt a little bit better. All right, guys, listen. We are now going to move over and start hearing from you guys. A little bit earlier, you guys were firing in your thoughts, opinions, and observations about Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. So let's jump over there now and start taking a couple of those right now. And we're going to start things off here with Mr. 47, who writes, Rapid Fire Movie Club suggestions. First Blood, Bone Tomahawk, Wind River, Buried, Running Man, Casino Royale, Pulp Fiction, Battle Royale Road. Thank you for the suggestions. We're here to talk about Two Towers, though, but thank you for the suggestions, Mr. 47. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name. Writes, I'm very likely in the minority, but Two Towers is my favorite of the trilogy. I don't think you're in the minority, as a matter of fact.
Chase the sunrises and sunsets.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I didn't even want to bother trying to. A favorite of the trilogy. I saw
Fellowship of the Ring
on DVD, and then saw this film in theaters. My mind was blown. I remember when the battle at Helm's Deep began and the orcs were assembling. I was thinking over and over, what am I watching? This is incredible. Again, and like today, you may think, okay, yeah, that was good. But was it that big of a deal? You got to understand, at that time, there had never been anything like it.
Nope.
We had never seen anything on screen like that before. I mean, the closest thing to it was Braveheart. But this was like Braveheart times 10.
Because it was monsters and, you know, it was just, and the scope of it, again, the scope of this movie is huge.
And by the way, I'm not saying it's 10 times better than Braveheart. I'm talking about the scale of the battles and all that kind of stuff.
I'm telling you, for a 3-hour movie in the theater where usually excitement drops off after a while, like, I mean, this was the most I've ever heard cheer throughout the 3 hours. So strong every single time.
All right, let's move on here. Next up, we've got Mr. 47, who writes, more suggestions. Ex Machina, Sinister Drive, Baby Driver, Logan Under the Screen, Fanboys, with John's friend Kyle Newman, 300, and Into the Spider-Verse. Thank you for the recommendations, Mista. All right, next up, Ryan Lohner writes, I was worried going into this one that it couldn't live up to the first. I think you're not alone, Ryan. I think a lot of us felt that way. The Gandalf versus the Barlog completely cleared that up and gave me an all-time great opener. And you know, it's cool because I still remember the moment when we're seeing the replay of the first film and the moment where you realized, oh, now this is new. It's after he falls. So he falls, he goes, fly, you fools. And then he lets go and drops. Then side wide shot of him falling, like, oh, that wasn't in the first movie.
Right.
And then he's battling the sword. You're right, man. One of the all-time great openings to a movie.
Well, a quick question. Like, I'm not sure how the books were released, but did the people who read the books know Gandalf was still alive when they went into this movie?
Yes.
Okay, because I completely went into blind, and I remember, like, losing Gandalf over what I thought in the first one. I didn't expect to see him in the second one, so you already saw a big cheer from me. Like,
well, I remember for a lot of the people who wouldn't know, who didn't read the books, And they see Gandalf in the trailers.
Oh no, I didn't see any trailers for this. Yeah.
But I know a lot of people they saw him in the trailers.
It was a great way to open this movie though.
Such a great opening. All right, let's keep moving on here. Next up, we've got Mr. 47 who writes, like Ray, I hadn't seen this trilogy in a long time. This will forever be top tier fantasy filmmaking. Playing Shadows of Mordor again it makes me want to play that game. It really does. Playing Shadows of Mordor again just to stay in this world. Aragorn is like Obi-Wan, just a badass.
I forgot about that game.
Now I want to go and play that game again, right? I mean, but he's right. Look, there are certain archetypes that Tolkien used, just like George Lucas used. So I don't know if Aragorn, I think Gandalf is really more of an Obi-Wan type than anything else. Aragorn is kind of like a mixture of a Luke and a Han. In some ways, Gimli's your Chewbacca, I guess. Somehow.
Sure, and I mean, I'm sure Lucas was heavily, influenced by this, the way he was of samurai movies and Joseph Campbell.
Yeah,
obviously.
definitely one of those influential films.
And if somebody releases a new game about the whole trilogy where it's multiplayer and you can play each character, man, I would eat that up. Because we had the games. I think they were by EA. But they followed the storyline like to a T, which at that time I was like, oh, that's cool. Like we're playing what we saw on the screen. I want like the whole thing.
Like an open world.
Yeah, like you could go around with a couple of your friends. Oh, that'd be so sweet.
I don't think there ever has been. Has there ever been a like World of Warcraft / Old Republic kind of complete open world MMORPG of Lord of the Rings?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I'd play that.
I would play that.
I'd play the hell out of that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, let's keep going on here. What's next? We've got MCP Scotty who writes, Rob, would you describe Gandalf versus the Barlog as effing metal?
Dude, it's the definition of effing metal, yeah.
When you smote your enemy's ruin upon the mountainside, that's metal.
Dude, it's so metal. I mean, that's the side of a 70s album cover,
It totally is.
I mean, it's
the side of some metalhead's band.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's some guy's band.
And that was the thing. I mean, that opening was so great. Because imagine if it wasn't there and it's just people walk. You meet all the characters walking, but that was unexpected. Like you said, when he falls down, you see the side angle. Like, oh, that's new.
Yeah.
And then you see. I mean, it's a free fall battle against a dragon.
That sounds so crazy.
It's so great
with a whip. All right.
Right.
What's next here? We've got Chase the Sunrise and Sunsets writes, this film far exceeded my expectations. It isn't the beginning. Where you set this, let me try this again. It isn't the beginning where you set the stage or the end where it gets wrapped up with a bow. Not only does it have to successfully carry the weight of what's occurred before it, but also prepare us for what's yet to come. But it also has to stand on it as its own film that feels satisfying. The movie does this to perfection, in my opinion. The ending with Sam's speech is a favorite ending to a film ever. I mean, and that's one of the things that all the Lord of the Rings films do, that the Hobbit films did not. Each of the Lord of the Rings films were a truly self-contained story.
Yep.
Each one had a beginning, middle, and end. Now, you can have some debate about the ending of Fellowship of the Ring, but still, it came to the ending of the Fellowship became dissolved.
Right.
That was the ending of it. That for success to happen, the Fellowship cannot remain together, and thus it dissolves, and that's the ending of the story. You move into this, you have a definitive beginning, middle, and end with the Battle of Helm's Deep and the battle at Isengard. And then you move into Return of the King. It has its own beginning, middle, and end. The Hobbit films did not really have that.
No, and The Hobbit is a small, more of a children's book. And they expanded it, and God bless Peter Jackson and Philippa and Fran and everyone who worked on those movies.
And I like them. I do. I do like them, but that's the big discrepancy.
They're just too overblown. The thing about the Lord of the Rings trilogy is it really is about the end of the world. It's the apocalypse. It's arrived. The Dark Lord, Satan, whatever, but Saruman is literally going to, or Sauron is literally going to destroy the world of men, the world of hobbits, the world of us. And with that looming over you, that's a tough act to follow. And I loved The Hobbit when I was a kid, but it's not Lord of the Rings.
That's my favorite book growing up, though.
Yeah, it's great.
Book.
And it was a story that maybe 1 or 2 movies, because they were originally only going to do it as 2, but they tried to turn it into another Lord of the Rings, even with the Battle of the Five Armies. And there's not that, what's at stake isn't there.
That was one of the things that was, because even when they said they were going to do The Hobbit as 2 films, even then we were like, really? Because The Hobbit is smaller of a book than any of the 3 Lord of the Rings books. And you did those as 1 film. So this is the smallest one. This you're going to break into 2. Okay, fine. And then came word that at the last hour, they decided, you know what? Let's make it 3. And we're like, really?
Yeah, because we're making almost $1 billion.
I mean, I get it. But anyway, but that to me was the big distinction. All right. Thanks a lot for writing that in, man. Next up, we've got Jared Vester, who sends in like a $20 super chat. Thank you, Jared, for supporting us on that level, man. And Jared writes, Gollum is a tragic character, and obviously Sam had reason to distrust and dislike him. But do you believe if Sam had treated him better, that Gollum would have stayed loyal to Frodo and Sam, or was he doomed to betray them? I think he was doomed to betray them. You remember, he's now been centuries corrupted. Centuries corrupted. I mean, you feel great for Smeagol when he has that little victory over Gollum about leave and never come back. You feel great for him, right? But that was always going to be temporary. And really, Gandalf kind of foresaw it. Like when he said, like, no, it's pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Like he has, for good or for ill, he's got a role still to play in this.
Plus,
and ultimately he did.
He was corrupted the same way that Michael Corleone lost his soul when he killed his brother.
Right.
You know, Gollum killed his brothers, killed his friend, Smeagol, and he's irredeemable. The power of the ring has him utterly, no matter how nice you were to him, he was going to stab you in the back, no matter what. Like you said, he's...
Michael Corleone killed his brother?
Oh, that's right. Somebody hasn't seen Godfather Part 2 yet. Wow, spoiler alert.
Now
Ray.
Not on Movie Club, Godfather Part 2.
Oh, man.
All right, let's keep going. What's next? Thanks for writing that in again, Jared. Really appreciate that, man. All right, B-Dub sends in a super chat just to be supportive. Next up, we've got Oilers Workshop writes, fans never super chat anything unless it's worth taking a long time to say. I love that line, by the way. That whole scene.
The Treebeard, right?
Yeah, it's like, we have agreed that you are not orcs. And then he gets that smile on his face. Ents never say anything unless it takes a long time to say. I mean, I love that line. That was just so cool. I love Treebeard. By the way, also voiced by John Rhys Davies, who was Gimli in the film. All right. You know what, guys? Before we move on with the next one, we've got one more sponsor spot here to thank, because if you've got a little tree beard growing down there, take care of that.
Oh, no.
With our friends at Manscaped. We want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, Manscaped. Now, guys, you know I love Manscaped. You've heard me go on and on about the Lawnmower 4.0 and that body wash. I love it so much. And so we got to ask, guys, have you started your spring cleaning yet? The carpets need cleaning, the drapes need dusting, and your lawn needs mowing, gentlemen. And you guys know Manscaped is more than just one product. They have a whole lineup of products to help you guys feeling, smelling, and looking your best. And so Manscaped is proud to present to you the Performance Package 4.0, which is the only tool that you need to keep your boys looking, smelling, and feeling good this spring. Now, to start off with, you get the Lawnmower 4.0. Guys, we have talked about this. What is wrong with us? Why have we for so long been using these terrible tools that were never meant for cutting our hair down there? The razor clipper things on our electric razors. That's barbaric, guys. You need the Lawnmower 4.0. And then there's the Weed Whacker. You guys have heard our own Ray Ora talk about this thing. He loves using it to get that hair in your nose and the ear hair. And then they offer lots of other stuff like the Crop Preserver. It's an anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer. The Crop Reviver. It's a spray-on toner for your balls. And of course, they've got the perfect grooming tool for your face with the Plow 2.0, the perfect razor for the finest shave on that face. So guys, right now, get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use the promo code Movie Club. That's manscaped.com and using the promo code Movie Club. It's time to throw out your old hygiene habits and upgrade your life. And a big thank you to our friends at Manscaped for supporting this episode of Movie Club. Okay, guys, let's finish things off here and get back to your questions. And we're going to get things picked up here with, we already did Chase, and now we're at Ryan Lohner, who writes, amazing how little screen time Gandalf and Saruman actually have in this movie compared to how much you remember them in it. It's true. Gandalf is not in this movie much. Like, at all. And neither is Saruman. Like, very, very little. As a matter of fact, like, near the end there, as he comes running out, you realize he's got no dialogue, no lines. He's just looking very worried. And then he was cut out of the third film entirely, except for in the extended editions.
Right.
Then there's a scene with him in the extended editions there, too. But you're right. Like, even though you remember his presence all the way throughout, Gandalf doesn't have a lot of screen time. It doesn't have a lot of screen time. All right. Next up. We've got Purple Haze 4564 writes, John, you have no power. Hear Gandalf the Grey. I will draw you Saruman as poison is drawn from a wound. By the way, that is such a great line.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just like there, and especially when he knocks him on the head and then you see Saruman go flying back. And that's when you really get the idea, oh, this whole white thing isn't just a new coat.
No.
There's a shifting in power. There's a turning of the tide there. But there's a story in there, isn't there, wasn't Christopher Lee actually a little bit perturbed about how his character?
No, he was, because that's not really in the book. You know, their confrontation,
yeah.
they kind of, because you had to have something like they had, you're making a movie. That's what an adaptation is. And they had to put those things in there because an audience would demand it. You know, so that's why, and Christopher, because it could have been goofy.
Yeah, it could have been. All right, next up, we've got Orange Hand who writes, Bernard Hill was such a goofball off camera. He played Theoden, did he not? Yeah, Bernard Hill. By the way, what else has he been in?
Oh,
man. I can't think off the top of my head.
He was in Titanic.
That's right. He was a ship captain.
Yeah.
In Titanic. Yeah. That's right. That's where I knew him most from. Yeah, I saw a lot of stuff that he was actually like a really fun dude on set and all that kind of stuff to be around. And why not? He's playing one of the greatest movie characters of all time. Yeah. All right, next up, we've got Johnny Weiner who writes, Miss Opportunity should have done a Spider-Man movie club today, 20th anniversary. I mean, we're not just going to do, every time there's an anniversary, we're going to do it on that. I mean, Godfather is almost universally acknowledged in the top 2-3 greatest movies.
And that was the movies. 50th anniversary.
Yeah, of all time, right? So we're not just going to always do, or else, you know, every month there's going to be some significant anniversary. It's not just going to be about anniversary. This was time for Lord of the Rings, so that's what we're doing. All right, next up. We got Timbula the Spider Monkey who writes, I love the last march of the Ents. Not just the scene, but the music is one of my favorite pieces of the entire trilogy score. Also, Theoden and Boromir are my two favorite characters from any medium. Well, I'll tell you, Timbula, I've said before that Boromir is actually my favorite character in all of fiction. Not just fantasy, but in all of fiction. Boromir is my favorite character. Just that sense of failure and redemption and all that kind of stuff just really makes, but Theoden, like you guys know, I think he is the MVP of the Lord of the Rings characters. He just has some of the best lines and the most grr moment in movie history when he says, "And Rohan shall answer." It's like, oh my God. And then he almost tops it with death, you know, oh my, so good. But I'm with you, man. Those are two fantastic characters. All right. Next up, we got Jared Vester who writes, was just going on with Wormtongue when he was shedding a tear when he saw Isengard's army. Yeah, that to me, this is one of the beautiful things that Peter Jackson brought to these movies, is that sometimes we see something and Jackson doesn't fully explain it. And I like that. Because when Wormtongue goes to the balcony with Saruman and he sees the Uruk-hai army, I mean, he's already made his choice. He's betraying man. He's trying to help him kill everybody. He's even telling them how to catch everybody before they get to Helm's Deep and all that kind of stuff. But when he sees that army, Wormtongue has a tear. And that's beautiful. And Peter Jackson said, nope, we don't need to explore that anymore. You just sit with that audience. How did you read that?
Well, I think, look, it's one thing to try and get what you want. It's another thing to be confronted with the reality of what you've done. And what you've done is allowed this army that was created unnaturally by, for all intents and purposes, satanic forces. And this army's express purpose is to go kill everyone from where you came from.
Leave none alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that moment, it was too late for him. He knew he was irredeemable. Mm-hmm. But he still had understanding of what he'd done. And like Boromir, he regretted it. I think there was regret in what he'd done, but he was too far gone. There was no turning back from what he did, but that didn't mean that he didn't have a moment of regret. Like even Satan, doubt, the moment of, like in the Rolling Stones song, his moment of doubt and pain,
It's great. It was a great moment.
Christ,
great moment in the
terrible.
movie. All right, next up. We've got Purple Haze who writes, the ending of Helm's Deep was so great when Gandalf shows up. It really was. As they look up to that hill and just see the white horse sitting there, like, what's the horse's name again? Fairfax?
Shadowfax.
Shadowfax. Fairfax was a street I lived by. That's right. Shadowfax. Lord of all horses. What does that mean, to be Lord of all horses? But at any rate, you see that, and then, of course, you've got Carl Urban rides up beside him. It's like, and then the ride Rohirrim. Such a great moment.
But did they have to pick the hill that was the steepest to go down?
Well, everything else was rocks.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, because like I was telling you, man, one horse trips, all of them
We're watching this movie. It's like,
and they'll just fall into the spears.
It's like this whole movie trilogy ends right here. One horse in front trips. They all fall and run right into the spears. It's like, yep, that's the end. End credits. All right, next up, we've got Bam Aham Yum writes, Sam is the best friend in all of cinema. Really is. I heard somebody say this once, and we brought up on the show a while ago. I heard somebody say this once, and it's so great. He goes, everybody wants a Sam, but not everyone's willing to be a Sam.
Yeah.
He said, you don't deserve a Sam till you're willing to be a Sam. Sam is he's the standard, man.
Go Sam yourself.
Go Sam yourself. Anyway, next up, we've got Ryan Lohner who writes, the way Theoden keeps it together about his son's death until he says no parent should have to bury their child just makes it even more painful. It totally does, man. And you know what? It might have moved me even more if that happened a little bit later after we got to know him even more. But he's away from his people. He doesn't let anybody feel shaken or weak. It's only in front of Gandalf that he says that no parent should have to bury their child, and he breaks down and weeps. And even then, I love the reaction of Gandalf. Gandalf just gives him one encouraging word and then realize this dude needs to be left alone. Mm-hmm. And the scene ends with a wide shot of Gandalf turning around, starting to walk back up the road. It's a beautiful moment and very, very, very well handled. All right, next up, we got Daniel Dang who writes, did Frodo actually see Gandalf as a supernatural dream in the beginning, or was that just a cinematic addition? Look, who knows what happens to you when you're a ring bearer? But he's got the ring. I choose to believe, although I'd have to ask Peter Jackson this specifically, I believe he actually saw a vision of what happened to Gandalf and that Gandalf lived.
I do too.
I can't justify that. I can't remember either if the books address any.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But also, it could be a way for the ring to give you false hope. Mm-hmm. You think like, oh, I'll go a little further and maybe Gandalf's still alive, and I'll meet him.
But it wasn't false hope. It was real hope.
Well, right. Yeah. But the ring didn't know. Like the power of evil might not have known that or maybe. Something. So it's
a good question, man. All right, next up. We've got Julian Mott who writes, I don't know why, but I've only seen the first two movies. What? This is my favorite. Okay, Julian, my film-loving brother. How do you watch the first two Lord of the Rings films?
He just said, that's it. Nah.
And no, that was great. I don't want to be let down by the third.
It reminds me of what I did with Breaking Bad. As at the end of season 5, before I know everything was going to go down, I just stopped and I just refused to watch the last season.
Because this is as good as it gets.
Yep. This is happy time.
End on a high. How do you not watch Return to the King the winner of 11 Academy Awards. Okay, you know what? The good news is you're lucky. You get to watch Lord of the Rings Return to the King for the first time. So do that in time for next week, man.
Or you'll get kicked out of the club.
You're out of the club.
There is no way you're in this club.
I've never heard of such a thing. I've never heard of anybody watching the first 2 Lord of the Rings and going, yeah, I'm good now. I've just never heard of that.
You're out of the family, Tom.
But it gives you an opportunity. It gives you an opportunity now to watch it for the first time.
We better hear from Julian next week after return. If you're not in, I don't care. Just go in the regular chat and message me. I better hear that you watched this last movie.
All right. What's next? We've got Timbula the Spider Monkey who writes, as a fan of Boromir, the extended edition is the version to watch. The scene with him, Faramir, and Denethor is amazing. It gives him more character. I agree it's a great scene. I don't believe it gave him more character. Like, I already believe that he was a full, perfect character the way it was. That extra scene was really good. It was really good, but I never felt it gave him more. But that's just me.
I thought it made him more tragic because you see him at his most heroic. You know, he's won and he's leading and he's a good brother. You know, and his father is so proud of him. And you realize because, you know, he kind of in the first movie, he's kind of the way he tries, but you haven't seen him at the height of his. There's a reason why he was sent to join the Fellowship. There's a reason why that Denethor sent him, and because he was the best of the best. And it makes, I think it makes his fall from grace even more tragic.
And his redemption all the better.
All the better.
All right. What's next? We've got Chase of Sunrise and Sunset writes, Edoras is astounding. Yeah. What's that?
Edoras is the big hall.
Yes. The halls of Edoras is astounding.
Rohan.
That first shot chills. I mean, there are so many, like just the detail in all the halls and in all the buildings and in all the courtyards. And it's just everything was done with such meticulous detail. It's just gorgeous to watch.
And they built that thing. You know, they're out in the New Zealand. I mean, that's Middle Earth, man. And that big helicopter shot when you're coming around. It's awesome. I mean, you look at it and they couldn't have. Where else would you have shot this movie? Like,
it's impossible to imagine today.
I just can't even imagine.
All right, next up, we've got B Dubs who writes, when they're panning the wall during the Helm's Deep and they are showing the characters and then all you see is the top of Gimli's helmet.
I know, that was so funny.
That moment is so great. And then you just hear Gimli, you couldn't have picked a better spot for it.
I know.
Like, a spot where there is nothing. I love that. And then Gimli had fun with it too. It was just such a great moment and you know what, but that's a testimony to how good Peter Jackson got us attached emotionally to these characters, that now we are a part of the Fellowship and we're in on the joke. And we're joking along with them when we love these characters. And that was a great moment, man. Absolutely. All right, next up. We've got Orange Hand who writes, the moment where Smeagol hears his name for the first time in centuries was going to have the origin scene before, was going to have the origin scenes before they moved it to the start of film 3.
That's true.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Why did they make that decision?
I think because, because
I do like the decision. I like it. I like starting film 3 with that.
I think it would have disrupted the flow of the film, and it when you. Spoiler alert for our friend who hasn't seen the movie, but the opening of Return of the King, what a great way to open that film in this bucolic outdoor setting with 2 people fishing, these 2 basically hobbits fishing and enjoying the outdoors, and you don't think, oh, wow.
And we actually see Andy Serkis.
Yeah, we see Andy Serkis, and I thought that was a brilliant decision. But that was another thing when they were making these movies. They could make those changes, and The Lord of the Rings was very iterative when they were making things. If things didn't work, they would go fix them and change them around. And I think that's an example of a really great change that they made. And then, of course, you get into the really long scene in the extended version as well, where they confront Saruman at Isengard.
All right, next up, we have Ryan Launer who writes, now be honest, even if you knew nothing about the book, did anyone actually buy that Aragorn might be dead after falling off the cliff? No, I don't know anybody that actually thought he was dead. I mean, don't get me wrong, when he went off the cliff, I fully expect them to run up to the cliff and he's hanging on by one hand, right?
Right.
But once they looked down and it was water, look, heroes going off cliffs where water is down there, that's 100% every time the hero lives.
Sure.
It's cotton water.
It's
It's a special type of water that doesn't break your back or nothing, no matter how far you fall.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Whenever a hero falls off something high, if there's water they're falling into, they're fine.
Yeah, Jello water.
Jello water.
You just sink.
It's a combination of regular water and cotton water. All right, next up, we've got Daniel Deng writes, how do the Urukais have the concept of menus? Yeah. Meat's back on the menu, boys. Ooh, that was grotesque.
I didn't even catch that.
That they eat their own. Say one day, oh great, let's rip. And you see their intestines flying up in the air and everything like that. It's like, wow.
Well, how do they even know language? You know, as they're conjured up out of the ether of the
and different accents,
Dark Lord power. You know, they're imbued with personality. They're given the information they need.
How
to
do
know.
they have the concept of menus?
I thought they were just manscaping. I didn't know that was intestines. I thought they were giving him a makeover.
Giving him a makeover. Well, it is a makeover. It's a very serious makeover. All right, next up. We've got the Jughood1 who writes, 1 and 2. Hey, John / Stonebanks and Rob and Ray. LOL. If you your rant 11 weeks ago against Bob Chapek was wonderful. We loved it. I've watched it. I loved it. Regarding, rewatched. Oh, I rewatched. Okay, I missed it with one of the explanations. I rewatched this wonderful trilogy. Every year, great content, guys. Love and respect from the UK, bros. Oh, thank you so much.
Aww.
And no, seriously, it is crazy how many people, like our viewer here. I know more people that Lord of the Rings is a annual rewatch for them than any other movie has people doing annual rewatches. I mean, more than Star Wars, although I probably watch Star Wars 4 or 5 times a year, but still, a lot of people have it as a point that you got to rewatch the Lord of the Rings trilogy every year.
Thankfully for that you created this thing, because after Return of the King, after I watch it, I might actually start making this an annual thing too, because as far as the first 2 movies, these things hold up as far as the effects. And they're a little long, but you know what? If I'm watching them at home, I can watch them at my own pace. So,
and again, like much like the first film, the effects completely hold up, except some compositing.
Yeah,
compositing techniques have come a long way. But the only times where you go, okay, well that's clearly an effect. It's a compositing issue. It's not anything else. It's simply compositing because the CG and all that kind of stuff is flawless. But again, it's like when Faramir and his guys take Sam and Frodo, and then they're in some kind of cave, and then they take the blindfolds off, and the camera starts to pan back. We see the 2 little hobbits amongst these giant men. It's like, yeah, there's a compositing issue, but it's just compositing. That's it. Like it holds up so freaking well. It's crazy. All right, next up, we've got Sidious Swift who writes, I once had each line in this movie memorized.
Oh wow.
I think I probably did too.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I know I did.
Don't ever
because like
that.
when these movies first came out on disc, I just watched them, and my mother too. My mom was psychotically into these movies and all the special features. I watched it over and over and over and over again. It's like not as much as I have Star Wars memorized, but I'm pretty sure at one point I had all the lines in this memorized too. I agree with you, Sidious. All right, next up we have already did the Jughead. We have Ryan Launer who writes, Viggo Mortensen's scream after kicking the helmet is because he actually broke 2 toes. I wince every time. Is that true?
Yep.
After they find the burning corpses and whatever, he kicks and he screams out, he broke his toe?
2 toes.
Oh my God. Did not somebody want to give him a lighter helmet, like a prop helmet instead?
I think it was just a freak thing. You know, it was just one of
and
those.
kicking the helmet even just was that kind of spontaneous? Or?
I think it was spontaneous.
Did they keep that scene, that original
yeah.
scene?
Oh, yeah. That's absolutely in the movie.
Oh, wow. I got to rewatch that part.
It's been a long time since I've watched special features because I don't have a physical media player anymore.
You know,
I do have a PlayStation
physical
5.
media.
That just has like a crawl that it stays Rob's thing every time.
All right, next up, what do we got here? Is this the last one, Purple Haze? Last one comes to us from Purple Haze who writes, John and crew, ride out with me, ride out and meet them for death and glory for Rohan. I remember still when he goes, ride out with me, ride out and meet them for death and glory for Rohan. Like when they do that and they open the doors, it's like, wait a minute. You had 8 horses in that room? I didn't see them there before, but okay. They start riding through and they're just blasting everybody. I'm like, why didn't you do this sooner? This seems like a pretty good strategy. But still, when they get on those horses and they ride, and it's like, man, but just when he says, like, okay, everything's dark, you know what? We're not going to cower. Let's ride out and meet them. Ride out with me. Meet them. And they're like, F yeah, let's do it. And they go out. Oh, it's such a good moment.
I'd be like, there's no safety rails on that little path? No.
It's very Star Wars-like. No safety rails. No safety rails at all
No,
on these
you.
walkways. These high walkways, no safety rails. Anyway, guys, that will wrap it up for this installment of Movie Club, where we have been talking about Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Make sure you guys join us again next week. And if you haven't watched the third one, I'm looking at you. If you haven't watched the third one yet, you got a week to get caught up, because next week we will finish off our Lord of the Rings series by talking about Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. No film in cinematic history has won more Academy Awards than Lord of the Rings. Return of the King, that is. That's a single film. It was nominated for 11 films, for 11 categories, and it swept, won every single category it was nominated for. It was an incredible year that year, so make sure you get caught up. I want to thank the guys joining me here for Movie Club, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at BurnettRM. Find me on Instagram at RM Burnett. Or now you can find me on TikTok at the Post Geek Singularity.
And right beside him is Ray Ora. Ray, where can people find you?
Ray Ora with a 0.
And of course, special thank you to fact checker Jonathan Voico, who's been running the show from back there. And a big special thank you to all of you guys for joining us here today, especially those of you who sent in those super chats. Number one, because you gave us great observations and things to talk about. But number two, you also supported this channel as you did it. And all of us involved with the show, thank you guys so much for your support. Hey guys, make sure you come back and join us for the John Campea Show tomorrow morning. Also, it is game day, which means tomorrow is our final Moon Knight open spoiler discussion. Make sure you join us for that as well tomorrow. So that'll do it for now, guys. My name's John Campea. Thanks for joining us at Movie Club, and until next time, bye-bye.